I'll I'll be going over the basics of Java as an introductory course kind of thing, and this workshop is called Cup of Java. Okay. So first, we need to get our place to actually do coding. So there's this really good website called REPL.it. It's basically an online coding software. You do need to make an account, but you can just sign in with your Google or Facebook account. Uh, and once you get signed in, there should be a button that says create, and then you're gonna click create, and then select a Java REPL, and then name it whatever you want, and then click create or okay. I'll post the instructions in the chat. And let me know once you guys finish getting onto REPL.it. Are you guys finding the right spot? Can you let me know in the chat? Give me a second. Let me share what you should be seeing once you create an account. Okay. Should look something like this. Oh, sorry, it was a green button. Blue button. Right over here, you should see a button looking like this. Just click create, select Java. Java might not be in the favorites, but find Java, select it, and then name it whatever you want, and then click create. All right. If you haven't gotten here yet, you can probably just search up how to create a Java REPL. I'm gonna move on. Okay. So, okay. If you're on a phone, you should probably get a computer because this doesn't work very well on phones. Um. Anyways, so assuming that you reach the screen that looks something like this, we can get started with doing actual coding. So our first activity, we're gonna learn how to create some output, which is called printing to the console in Java. Okay, so you should see this text in the coding box. For now, we can ignore these lines. They are not important right now. You will learn about them later if you keep learning about Java. But anyways, so this third line here it says system.out.println hello world. If you click the run button at the top of the screen, and then it should take a second for the computer to read through all the code, and then it will print a line that says hello world. on the output on the right. Okay. So basically what this line of code does is it tells the computer to print whatever is in the quotation marks. And you can add more lines under this, more statements that look like this underneath. For example, underneath you could put system.out.println goodbye world or something. Make sure it's in quotation marks. Just make sure whatever lines you put that it's within these brackets so that the computer will know to read there for print statements. And if you want to print multiple text on the same line, you can just use system.out.print and then it won't change to a new line when it prints that text. So you should try and remember that the computer will print whatever commands you put here in order. So if I put system.out.println hello there above this, it will print hello there and then hello world. So you should try this out, see if it is working as you would expect. All right. So hopefully you're able to figure out how to do printing statements because that is going to be essential to getting any sort of output from our program. Okay. So now we're going to learn how to make a variable. So variables in Java are basically the same thing as variables in math, except you can change what its value is anytime you want. So to create a variable, what we need to do is we put the variable type. For now, we'll deal with just numbers. So we'll put int or int, and then put the name of the variable after. You can name it whatever you want. You can name it banana, apple, variable, car, whatever you want. And then make sure to put a semicolon after after every line of code, make sure to put a semicolon at the end. Otherwise, the computer will get confused. So this is how you create a variable. If you want to create a variable and give it a value, then you just do this. Then you just do the same thing, but put the equal sign and then set it to any number you want. Make sure that it's not a decimal. And then to modify the variable after you've created it, you can just do the same thing, but without this int text, and then just put the name of the variable and then put the equal sign and then put whatever number you want after that, and the computer will change the value of the variable to what you put there. And if you want to use the variable, if you want to output the variable, you just put it into our print statement. But instead of quotation marks and text, you just put the name of the variable, like as you can see here. Okay, so here's an example. So I have this program here. So first we create a variable called x. So now the computer knows there's a variable called x, but it doesn't know what its value is yet. Now we're going to set x to equal 5. And then in the next statement, we output what x, and as you can see here, the number 5 has been outputted because it's printing the value of x. In the next line, we set x to equal 6, and then we print x again, and as you can see, the value of x is now 6. And then in the next line, we create a new variable called y, and in the same line, we set the value of y to 7. And then in the next line, we print out the value of y. And as you can see, the number 7 has appeared in the console. So this is how you create, modify, and use variables. And this is also very important for most Java programs. All right. So now we're going to learn other ways to modify variables. So one way you can just increment the value of variable by 1 or decrease it by 1, you can just do var or name plus plus. and then semicolon. This will increase the value of the variable by 1. And if you do minus minus, it'll decrease it by 1. You can also add values. You can also add, subtract, multiply, divide, all of those operations like this. So you put the name of the variable and then plus equals and then a value and then a number like 5. This will add 5 to your variable. If you do minus equals, it will subtract. If you do times equals or asterisk equals, it will multiply. Slash equals will divide. And this percent sign, called modulo, it's basically just getting the remainder. So this will get the remainder of so this will set the variable to the remainder of what its original value divided by 5. So if the variable was 14, this statement would change the value of the variable to 4. And then you can also add multiple variables together. So for example, this is setting a variable to equal the value of apple plus banana. If apple was 3 and banana was 8, this would set var to equals 11. So here's an example of how I used variable operations. So I create a variable called x again, and then I set x to equal 5, and then I increment x up by 1, so now x equals 6. And then in the next line, I subtracted 2 from x, so now it equals 4. And then I multiply x by 3, so it equals 12. And then the next line, I create a new variable called y, and I set it to 2. And then finally, I print the value of x divided by y, which is equal to 6. And as you can see, the number 6 was printed here. So these operations will help you modify variables a lot easier. All right. So now we're going to learn about other types of variables besides just these integers. So we already know about this. You can set it to 1 or -5 or 69 for 20. Just basically integer numbers. They can be negative or positive. And then we have a variable called the long. It's basically just the same thing as integers, but it can store really big numbers. Like I'm talking in the billions, the trillions, the quadrillions. A normal integer can't do that. So if you're wondering about the exact limitations of an integer, it can only store up to about 10 digits, while the long can store up to about 20 digits. And then the double are basically decimal numbers, so they can also be integers, but they can also be decimals, like 3.4. You could also store 1 into a double, but you cannot store 3.4 into an integer. Okay. And then the next type of variable is called a Boolean. It's basically just a true or false expression. You can set it to 2 different values, true or false. Try set to anything else, it won't work. And then you've seen the string before. It's basically just text like hello world. You can put any text, any length into it. Just make sure you surround your text in quotations. Otherwise, the computer won't know that you're talking about a text and not a variable. And then the character, or char, it just stores a single character like G, H, or exclamation mark. Make sure you put it in single quotations. And all these variables are defined in the same way, as you can see. This is basically how you define integers, just with different values and variable types. And remember, our previous operations, they work on all of these number types, but of course they don't really work on Boolean strings or characters, because you can't really add those kinds of expressions. Okay, now we're going to learn about loops. This is my favorite part of Java. So there are multiple types of loops, but the one that we're going to learn is called the while loop. And while loops are pretty simple. So you put the statement while, and then you have parentheses, and then you have these curly brackets. So in the curly brackets, you just put any types of lines of codes you want, and then in the parentheses you put some sort of expression. Like for example, here, in this loop, it'll keep repeating lines 5 and 6 until this statement is no longer true. So we created a variable num and we set to 0. So now it'll keep repeating here until num is no longer less than 5. So if we trace through here, on the first time through the loop, 0 is less than 5, of course. So it'll go through the loop and it'll print repeat and it'll increment num by 1. So on the next time, it'll now num is equal to 1, but that's still less than 5. So it'll keep going, so it'll go through here again, print the statement, repeat again, and num will go up by 1. And it'll keep doing that 5 more times until finally the value of num equals 5. And 5 is equal to 5, it's no longer less than 5, so the loop will exit and it'll go to the end of the code. So, and now it's important to note here, we create, in the parentheses we put while 1 is equal to 1. And this loop will never terminate because the value 1 will always equal 1. There's no way to exit the loop like this. Okay, so let me explain more what exactly goes into the parentheses. So basically what goes into the parentheses is like, it has to be a true or false expression. So for example here, while num is, and inequality expressions are basically true or false. Here are all the inequality things. Make sure when you're saying equal to, you put 2 equal signs. Otherwise, the computer will think you're trying to assign a value to a variable. And if you're trying to say not equal to, you use the exclamation mark and then the equal sign. And then for less than or equal to, you do the less than and then equal sign. And for greater than or equal to, you put greater than and equal sign. Okay, so here are valid things that can go in the parentheses. You can put num is greater than 5 because this is a true-false expression. And then in the next one, you can also say num equal to var. That's also an inequality, which is a true or false expression. And then over here, we create a boolean called named condition, and we set it to equal true. And this is valid because booleans are true-false expressions, so they can also go into loops, or the parentheses. However, here we put num plus 3 into the loop. That's invalid because num plus 3 is a number. It's not a true-false expression. So the computer won't know what you mean by keep doing this until num plus 3 is not true, because that doesn't really make sense. So make sure always to put true-false expressions inside the parentheses here. Okay, so now we're going to learn about if statements. So if statements, they have a similar structure to while loops, but they have a much different purpose. So if statements, basically, they create these code blocks that only execute under certain conditions. So in this case, we have if num is greater than 0, then it'll print this number as positive. So what the computer will do is it goes here, it sets num to 5, it goes to line 4, and then it checks is num greater than 0. And then it sees, yes, num is greater than 0 because 5 is greater than 0. So then it'll go into this code block and print out this number is positive. And then it'll go down to, and then it'll see that it's at the end of the code block. It'll go down to line 7 and it'll check, is num greater than 0? Or is num less than 0? But 5 is not less than 0, so we'll ignore this code block and go straight to line 9, and then it reaches the end of the code, so the program terminates. So those statements, they do look like while loops, but they have quite a different purpose, but they are equally helpful. Okay, so now that we've learned all this, we're gonna do some coding activities. So I have multiple difficulties that you can do. The easy activity is print all even numbers from 0 to n in an order using a loop. So what I mean by 0 to n is, you need to create a variable named n, and then this variable is basically like your independent variable if you do science experiments. So you should be able to change n, and your program still executes as you would expect. So basically, print all even numbers 0 to n. If I set n to 13, then whatever your program does, it should print all even numbers from 0 to 13. So that's basically just how n notation works. Okay, your medium activity is to print the n by n times table. If you don't know what a times table looks like, it's basically just a two-dimensional table where each cell is the value of the row times the value of the column. You can look it up if you don't know what times table looks like. And the hard activity is print the first n numbers of the Fibonacci sequence. So Fibonacci sequence, if you don't know what that is, it's pretty simple. You can look it up as well. But trust me, coding the Fibonacci sequence is going to be quite hard to do. And now, if you really feel confident about your coding abilities, as I really hope you try the challenge, which is print the first n prime numbers. Now this is easier said than done. You will need You will need to use everything you've learned for the challenge and for all the other activities. And if you need me to review something from a previous slide, just let me know. I'll of course explain something if you're not sure. Through it with the class. I can also just DM you back with explanations. All right, so now let's get started on the activities.
Just kind of, you just kind of like, your mic kind of glitched and we didn't hear what you said.
Oh, okay. Do you hear about me going through the activities?
Yeah.
Oh, all right.
I
Okay.
okay.
All right. So if you need any help, you can direct message me, and I'll send you a message back, or you can just ask me to go back to a slide, and I'll be sure to do that. Okay. Well, hopefully you've been able to keep along with us, and we're able to log on to REPL. So let's get started on the activities. I'll check in about 10 minutes.
Hi.
I know a little bit of Java, so
Well,
yeah.
well,
I
Java
know some.
Java is really similar to JavaScript, obviously.
No, it's not related to JavaScript. It's nothing related to JavaScript. Java is JavaScript.
Okay.
I have a question. Is it
Yeah, go ahead.
possible? Is it possible to hack into a power grid of a country?
Yes, I don't encourage this.
So if it was America's power grid, it would be a lot easier, right? Because it's a centralized power grid, so everything's connected. Yes.
Yeah, I suppose.
So then I could shut off America's power source.
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend doing that though. Also, I think they have security.
I need to make a call. 1 second. I need to make a call to Putin.
Oh, okay. All right, have fun.
I keep on getting a screen full of errors.
Type in chat because I don't understand what you're saying.
Oh, make sure you have semicolons after every line. That annoys every new coder, me included.
It still doesn't work.
Okay, that is unfortunate. You will, trust me, you will get better at this if you put in any practice, to be honest. And, well, if you find it fun, you will naturally love coding. And if, sorry, I'm rambling. Okay, the error code is a part of coding life. It's sad, but you will get used to it. Okay, I'm gonna go through the solutions. Okay, so our easy activity, print all numbers from 0 to n. So we create so you need this variable called n, and for all my examples, I'm gonna set n to equal 10. Okay. Oh. Okay, so next we create a variable called I, and we set this to 0. Okay, so now we create our loop, and we're going to be incrementing I throughout this loop. So since we're going up to n, we should make it so that I only goes up to n. So we have a while loop where while I is less than n, we print out whatever I is currently at, and then we increase I by 2 so that we make sure that I is always even. And this is what your output should look like. Okay. So if you did the easy activity, there are actually many variations to this problem. This is just one simple solution to the problem. Okay, and also if you're still getting error messages, I do want to help resolve your problems after I go through the solutions for sure. Okay, so our medium activity, print the n by n times table. So we're gonna have to do this thing where we put a loop inside of a loop, so we get this cool looking 2D map. Okay, so first we have a variable n, set it to 10, and then we create a variable called r, which means rows for in my brain. So and we're gonna set it first equal 1. Now we have a while loop for while r is less than or equal to n. So this will make so that the rows will go from 1 to 10 inside that loop, we're gonna create a new variable called c, meaning column, and we're gonna set it to equal 1 as well. And then inside that loop, we're gonna have another loop called where c goes up to n. So it's gonna be while c is less than or equal to n. We're gonna print out row times column, and then and make sure that it's a regular print statement, not a print ln, so it'll print on the same line. And then after that, we print a space, so we can actually decipher the multiple numbers. And then and then at the end of each loop, we're gonna increment the column by 1 and then increment the row by 1 in this order. And then at the end of each of the outer loop, we're gonna go to switch to a new line. And then it'll produce this cool looking map of multiplication. And it's not exactly aligned very well. And that is a problem that you could fix, but it's not really necessary at this level. Okay, now the solution to the hard activity. This one requires a bit of tricky thinking. So first we create a variable called n. So first we have our n, and then we're gonna have a variable called I, and then we're gonna have a variable called current and a variable called previous. Now this one is gonna get a bit confusing. So we have a loop while I is less than n. We're going to create a temporary variable, and we're going to set it to equal our current value, our current variable. Then we're going to print out what current is, and then we're going to add current by the previous variable, and then we're going to set our previous variable to what current used to be, which is temp, and then we're going to increase I by 1. So basically the Fibonacci sequence is where you add the previous two numbers to equal the current number. So your output should look like this. So you have 1, and then 1 plus the previous, which is 0, then is equal to 1, so the next number is 1. And then the next number is 2, because the previous two numbers added together is 2. And then the next number is 3, because 1 plus 2 is 3. The next number is 5, because 2 plus 3 is 5. And then 8, because 3 plus 5. 13, 5 plus 8. 21, 8 plus 13. And then all the way to 55, which is the 10th number of the Fibonacci sequence. So this one is pretty confusing, but and usually you'll have more time to work out these problems. But yeah, a lot of coding problems require this kind of like outside the box thinking. Okay, and now our challenge activity. Find the first n prime numbers. So we're gonna have our variable n equal to 10, and then we're gonna create a new variable called found, and then we're gonna set it to 1 because our first prime number that we know is 2, and we're going to ignore 2, and we can go straight to the next few numbers. So we can say that we've already found the prime number 2, and then we're going to set I to equal 2 so that it will find every prime number after 2. And now we're going to print out 2 so that it's included in our output. And then while found is less than n, so what this does is while the number of prime numbers we found is less than n, or which is less than 10, we're going to increase I by 1. And now we're going to check to see if what I is at right now is a prime number. So what we do that is we create another temporary variable. I called it j here. We're going to set to equal 2. And then we're going to have a boolean called is prime. We're going to set it to true. And we're setting it to true because in this loop, we're going to check every single factor. We're going to check every single factor between j and I to see if the remainder is 0. And if for any number between I and j, there is a factor that is 0, then we're going to set is prime to equal false. Because the prime number, its only factors is itself and 1. So we're going to check every number from 2 to itself minus 1. And if any of those numbers factor out of our variable I, then we're going to set is prime to equal false. And we're going to increment j by 1 throughout this loop, so we check every number. And then at the end, we will discover whether the variable I is prime or not. And then if it is prime, we're going to increase found the number of prime numbers we found by 1. And then we're going to print j. You could also print I. I don't know why I printed j, to be honest. They will both equal the same thing at the end of the loop. And it's going to keep going through this until we found n prime numbers. So that is a solution to our challenge activity. And there's actually another way to do this, a much faster way to find our answer. It's using this thing called the Sayev of Eratosthenes. I don't know how to pronounce that. It's basically an algorithm for finding prime numbers, but you need to know how to use arrays and stuff. So if you're interested in learning more about Java, that's a very cool topic that you could look into. Okay. All right. So if any of you guys had questions or problems that you encountered during your coding, I really want to see your like error codes or whatever problems you had, because it's basically like it's really unsatisfying to leave a problem unfinished, in my opinion. But anyways, so now we've used REPL a lot, but honestly, it's a really slow it takes like 10 seconds to compile code. So if you download your own IDE is basically integrated. I actually don't know what it stands for, but it's basically a place for coding like REPL. But if you download an application, it's much faster. You can compile a program within milliseconds. So there's two popular ones. There's IntelliJ and Eclipse. Hold on, let me get the links in. Oh shoot. How do I? Okay, I'll put the links in the chat. Give me a sec. Okay, so basically these IntelliJ and Eclipse, they're like REPL, but they're downloaded applications where you can code in, and they're insanely fast. Personally, I use Eclipse for my coding activities, but I don't know the difference between IntelliJ or Eclipse. You can use whichever one sounds more appealing to you. Let me go back into... Okay, so yeah, REPL is good for starting, but if you want to keep doing Java, I really recommend you download one of these. Okay, so yeah, okay. Please send like any error codes that you've had to me, and I'm gonna talk a bit about like the applications of what we've learned into like educational stuff. So, for example, printing out statements. Basically, any form of output, you need to get output. If you want to like check if you're like managing a class and you want to check a student's grade, if you click a button and it'll print out the student's grade, that's where you would use print statements. Variables, you need variables to like track a student's grade or the amount of assignments they have. Variables are used a ton in education systems. And a loop, if you want to give an assignment to every student, you want to loop through every student and give that assignment to them, rather than assign it individual, rather than like specifically assign to every single student. A loop can automate that process really well. That's ways that Java concepts are used so much in like education and stuff. Okay, and people have been using these IDEs the whole time. Well, okay, I sent the links to the wrong person, but okay, I have the links of both IDs in the chat now. If you have any questions, now's the time to ask them. And if you didn't solve your challenge or activity yet, I'd love to help you as well for that. Or you can just find these problems are pretty common online, so you can probably find the solution. And is that it? Yep, that's it. Okay. So I hope you learned something today. And yeah, that's the end of the workshop.